Shalom, beloveds of the King. Praise Abba Yahuwah. Here we are again today, having to come together in order to be able to look at our Torah portion. This is Torah portion Mikketz, and it means at the end. And it's Torah portion number 10, and this is from Genesis 41:1 to 44:17. And the Haftorah that we are going to be reading is going to be from 1 Kings 3 verses 15 to 4 verse 1. And this is a very powerful Torah portion as we continue with our story of Yosef. And when we start to look at the life of Yosef and the reason for his life. And so today, by the grace of the Father, we'll see if we can do the two Torah portions, Torah portion 10, and I'll do Torah portion 11. And as we have come out of the season of where we have just celebrated Shavuot, we just celebrated Shavuot on last week, Sunday. And now, when we look at these Torah portions and the life of Yosef, how everything just ties in together in the season and the timing of what the Father is wanting to share with us in this hour. So let us pray. Abba Yahuwah, I just want to praise and I just want to thank you, my Father, for this day. I thank you for your Shabbat. I thank you for this Shabbat being in the land and being able to celebrate the fullness of the day of rest, just as you would want it to be able to be celebrated, where it is a day set apart unto you, that we may come and sit at your feet and just be able to hear your word being spoken to us. And so, Father, I thank you for this Torah portion of Mikketz. And thank you, Father, for the life of Yosef. And thank you, Father, that we don't always understand our lives and we don't always understand how you go about doing things. But when you have spoken a prophetic word over our lives, truly at the appointed time, all things will come into fullness. And there is a time when everything is that you have spoken, not that which man has said, not that which what we have thought, but that which you have spoken, that which you have shown, that which you have confirmed shall surely come to pass. And so, Father, I just thank you for the story of Yosef, and for the story of Yosef in where we are right now, in having come out of our time of where we have just celebrated Shavuot, where we too are being thrust forth into the fullness of the things that you have ordained for our lives, for the season and the time that we are in, to be able to bring in the harvest, to be able to be an instrument of light, to make a difference for you in this hour, in this time. That we will be those sealed off and thrust forth by you to bring in a harvest into your kingdom. And so, Father, I thank you that I can bring this time to you right now. I thank you. May you speak through my mind, speak to my mind and speak through my lips, the very oracles that will come from your heart, that you will open up this Torah portion to us for us to be able to understand the depth of what it is that you are wanting to show us in this hour, so that we may understand in the season and the time that we find ourselves in, how Yosef will speak to our hearts and speak to our lives for us to understand your seasons and your times and your set apartness, and how important it is obedience to you, to move as you tell us to move, and to not compromise, but to stand for truth, because it's only those who truly stand on truth till the end that you can use to do mighty and great exploits on this earth. And so I praise and I thank you for this in Yeshua's name. Amen. And so we are looking at Genesis chapter 41, and we read from verse 1, and it says, "And it came to be that at the end of 2 years' time, that the Pharaoh had a dream and saw him standing by the river. And so understand, the Pharaoh is going to have a dream. And remember, Joseph in the prison, he relayed the dream of the butler and the baker. And yet at the end of the day, 2 years later, and the baker was put to death, he was beheaded, but the butler was restored to his place, but never remembered Joseph as being the one that was, what he spoke was the truth, but it wasn't remembered. But now 2 years later, the Pharaoh has a dream, and in his dream he saw 7 cows. So he saw 7 cows coming up out of the river, beautiful looking and fat, and they fed amongst reeds. And then he saw 7 other cows coming up after them out of the river, ugly and lean of flesh, and stood by the other cows on the bank of the river. And the ugly and lean of the flesh cows ate up the 7 beautiful looking and fat cows. Then the Pharaoh awoke, and he slept and dreamed a second time, and saw 7 heads of grain coming up on one stalk, plump and good, and 7 lean heads scorched by the east wind coming up after them. And the 7 lean heads swallowed the 7 plump and complete heads. Then the Pharaoh awoke and saw it was a dream, and it came to be in the morning that his spirit was moved, and he sent and called for all the magicians of Mitzrayim and all its wise men. And the Pharaoh relayed to them his dream, but there was no one who could interpret them for the Pharaoh. So you see, this is, man and the magicians and sorcerers and all these people that have all this wise and wisdom of the world. They might be wise in their eyes and they might have the wisdom of the world, but there's a difference between the wisdom that comes from the Father. And so interpretations of dreams comes only from the Father, does not come from man, but the Father will interpret prophetic things. Prophetic things belong to the Father. Prophetic things do not belong to human beings. And the sad thing is, many people try and interpret things in their own interpretation without having to truly seek the Father for wisdom and counsel. But to the Father belongs all knowledge and wisdom. And here we see that at the appointed time, Father strategically will align things and his plan, what he has planned. No one is able to interpret the Pharaoh's dream, and this is all part of the Father's plan. He's got his plan, he's got his timing and how he will do things. And all of a sudden, in verses 12, we see that there was with us a Hebrew youth. So this is the cupbearer. The Pharaoh relays his dream, and the cupbearer remembers that both him and the baker were sitting in prison, and he remembers that there was a young Hebrew youth, a servant of the captain of the guard, and we related to him, and he interpreted our dreams for us. To teach man, he interpreted according to his own dream. To each man he interpreted according to his own dream. Then the Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, verse 14, and they hurried and brought him out of the dungeon, and he shaved and changed his garments and came to the Pharaoh. So you see, there is a time coming ahead of us when the Father is going to remove the old garments and he's going to put upon us a new garment. What did he do to the prodigal son when the prodigal son came back? He gave him a robe. He was given a ring of authority. He was given a robe, and he killed the fatted calf for him, and he dined with his father. The father was waiting for this prodigal son. And so the Father has an appointed time for those that have gone through much, for those that have surrendered to the Father, for those that have walked out his purposes and plans, for those that have not done things of the flesh, but for those that even when they were put to the test, just like Joseph was put to the test through Potiphar's wife, he stood his ground. He did not succumb to his flesh. He did not do things according to his flesh. He did not go about forcing things in his way and trying to save his flesh, but instead he allowed himself to go through the process that the Father had laid out for him. and the Father was going to have his way. And so if you want to save your life, you will lose it in the end. But if you lose your life for his name's sake, you will save it in the end. And this is exactly what has happened with Joseph. And by this time, Joseph is not only going to be able to come, but Joseph is going to be washed, cleansed. So by this time, Joseph will be washed, he will be cleansed, and he's going to be given a new robe. And so with those that are coming into the fullness of the Father's timing now and the timeline of where we have received the Ruach of Yahuwah, that has come by power and by fire, and the Ruach of Yahuwah is to be able to be there to lead and guide and show us the way that we are to go. And there is a washing and there is a cleansing. And it's so interesting because when we were on the steps, on the 7 steps that day, there was a washing, there was a rain that fell down, there was a sprinkle of rain, a kiss from heaven. And at the same time, there was the fire that came down where the Father was going to clothe us in new robes. And he is washed, he is cleansed, and he's going to stand before the Pharaoh. And the Pharaoh said to Joseph in verses 15, I have dreamt a dream, and there is no one to interpret it. Now I myself have heard it said of you that you understand a dream to interpret it. And Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, it is not me. Let Alua answer Pharaoh with peace. And so at the end of the day, Joseph has learned that everything that is about his life is to bring glory and honor to the Father. It's not about him. It's not about his life. Everything he does is to be able to bring glory to the Father. And so at the end of the day, he has surrendered to the Father, and he understands that the interpretations of dreams does not come from him. And so we see this humility that's coming out of Joseph. Joseph has now been broken down in his character, and he's a humble young man. And he understands that the interpretation comes from the Father. And so if we have a look and we see the interpretation of the dream in verses 28, and it says that this is the word which I spoke to the Pharaoh. Alua has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. 7 years of great plenty are coming in all the land of Mitzrayim, but after them 7 years of scarcity of food shall arise, and all the plenty be begotten in the land of Mitzrayim, and the scarcity of food shall destroy the land. And the plenty shall not be remembered in the land, because the scarcity of food following is very severe. And the dream was repeated to the Pharaoh twice, because the word is established by Alua, and Alua is hastening to do it. And so many times the Father will show us dreams and visions more than once, because he's hastening his word to do what he has spoken. And so we need to understand that the interpretation of dreams and dreams belongs to the Father, and the Father's trying to show us what is coming. So even though it might tarry, and even though it might take time, things that the Father has shown us in dreams might tarry and might take time, but at the appointed time it shall surely be what it has spoken to be. Habakkuk chapter 2 speaks about that write the vision down, because even though it tarry, at the appointed time, it shall surely come to pass. And this is exactly what we're seeing here, that this vision is being given, and yet at the appointed time, he's given it twice, to know that at the appointed time, this vision shall surely come to pass. And so, if we look at Habakkuk chapter 2, and it says, and Yahuwah answered me, Habakkuk chapter 2 verses 2, and Yahuwah answered me and said, write the vision and inscribe it on tablets, so that he who reads it runs. For the vision is yet for an appointed time, and it speaks of the end, and does not lie. If it lingers, wait for it, for it shall certainly come, it shall not delay. See, he who begins is not upright in him, is puffed up, but the righteous. See, he whose being is not upright in him is puffed up, but the righteous one lives by his steadfastness. So a lot of the things that has been written by the prophets, they are still tarrying. They haven't yet come to pass, but at the appointed time, they shall surely come to pass. So at the appointed time, the Father will do what he says he will do. And these are the things that the Father is going to do. And so Joseph is saying to the Pharaoh that you've received the dream twice, because the Father is going to hasten his word to perform it. And now, verse 34, he tells the Pharaoh to do this and to let him appoint overseers over the land to take up 1/5 of the land of Mitzrayim in the 7 years of plenty. So this is where Joseph has now been equipped. So understand, Father will never send you into a place where he has not beforehand equipped you. So when the Father is taking you on a process, wherever he's thrusting you forth into, so understand, as the thrusting forth is taking place now, after we received the Ruach at Shavuot, after we have been endowed with power, and when he's telling the disciples to go forth and proclaim to the nations, teaching them to obey everything that I have commanded you. He equipped those disciples. He didn't just send them out. So we have been equipped. Everything for such a time as this, you have been created. Because why? He's been equipping us for the work that we need to do. And so therefore, it's not a time to shy away. It's a time now to be bold. We are bold in him. You have got a choice. You're either going to fear man or you're going to fear the Father. But you are going to have to stand in the day that is ahead of you, because the days are evil and we need to be able to stand for the kingdom. And everything of what the Father has done in Joseph's life, having put him in Potiphar's house to run the whole household, having put him in the jail to have to run the whole household of the jail, to have been one of those in charge of the whole jail, because Father's favor was upon him. This is all part and parcel of the equipping that has been on Joseph's life to thrust him forth into the fullness of the things that has been ordained for Joseph's life. And this is now where Joseph is going to be thrust forth into the fullness for what is to be done. And so this is where in 38, the Pharaoh said to his servants, could we find another man like him, a man in whom is the spirit of Eloah? So you see, we cannot be thrust forth into the fullness of the things that the Father has ordained for our lives if he is not upon us, if his spirit is not on us and not upon us and not with us and not operating through us. At the end of the day, we need to get out of the way. Less of me and more of him. The more I get out of the way, the more he is there. The more I am in my mind, in my will, in my emotions, the less of the Ruach is going to be working through me. And so I need to get out of the way so that more of the Ruach is upon me to be able to do the work that the Father's got for us to do. But we reason many things in our minds, and we are in our minds, and we do not do the work of the Father because our mindsets get in the way. Our world gets in the way. We reason things out in our mind, and that is not where the Spirit of Yahuwah dwells. The Spirit of Yahuwah is the one who comes forth and does what your mind would not want to do. Because the Spirit of Yahuwah is one who's going to be able to speak forth the very oracles that come from the Father's heart. Then the Pharaoh said to Joseph, since Eloah has shown you all this, there is no one as discerning and wise as you. And so you see, we need the discernment and the wisdom that comes from the Father in order to operate in these days. And that comes with authority and power that comes from the Ruach of Yahuwah. And so this is what the Father is doing right now in Genesis chapter 41 verses 42. The Pharaoh took his seal ring off his hand and put it on Joseph's hand. And he dressed him in garments of fine linen and put a gold chain around his neck. And he had him ride in the second chariot which he had. And they cried out before him, bow the knee. And he set him over all the land of Mitzrayim. So Joseph gets the ring of authority, and he's dressed in fine linen for the righteousness of Yahuwah. So you see, because of his obedience, he's been tested and tried in his obedience to the Father. He's had his brothers turn against him. He's had many turn against him just for him to stand obedient to the Father in what the Father has ordained for him to do. And therefore, he will open the doors of the blessings, and the authority of Yahuwah will be upon Joseph. So don't worry what you have gone through. Don't worry what has happened in your life. Don't worry if you've gone through hardships and trials, and people have misinterpreted you, and people have turned against you, and people have misunderstood you, because of you standing for what is right in the eyes of Abba Yahuwah. Because at the end of the day, he's the one who's going to raise you up. He's the one who's going to be able to get you to be able to be a deliverer for your people. And this is, I know that this is the Father's heart at this point in time. He's strategically placing people in places to be able to be like Joseph's in their sphere of influence, to be a deliverer for the people that will be around them. And Joseph, and so don't worry what you have gone through. Everyone will bow to Joseph, just like in his dreams. Abel will raise us up at his appointed time. But what did he have to go through? He needed to be faithful. He needed to stand. He needed to not bow to man. He needed to not fear man and what man thought and what man said. He did not fear Potiphar's wife. He did not fear. He feared only Yahuwah. Who do you fear? Do you fear man that is around you? Do you fear what man thinks and what man says? Or do you fear Yahuwah? Do you stand on Yahuwah's word? Do you speak Yahuwah's word with authority and power because you fear him and you stand for him and him alone? And so, what all did he have to go through? What all was it that he needed to be able to go through to prove that he was faithful and allow the Father to take him through the process? And so sometimes we have to speak the truth, and it's going to be difficult for us to speak the truth even to those around us, because the Father is testing us. And this is what we must understand. In all things we get tested. And this is what we must understand. Our lives is being tested. We are being tested. Are we faithful to the Father, even in the face of opposition? Are we faithful to the Father, even when we are going to be able to maybe offend people or upset people? But if we are going to be faithful to the Father, that is the test. The test is, will we stand for him in the face of people? Or will we bow our knee to the system and to man, because that's the system? Or will we only bow to the Father? And so Joseph had to prove his faithfulness to the Father, just like Yahushua had to be faithful to the Father. Just like Joshua had to speak the things that the Father told him to speak, to the extent that it caused him to be able to be scourged and hung at a stake because of what he stood for. He was betrayed by his own. Judas Iscariot sold him out for 30 pieces of silver, just like Joseph was sold out by his brothers. And so here we see that Joseph has been a type of Yahushua, but he was to become a deliverer for his people. And that is why he had to go through much. And for every leader that the Father raises up that's to lead his people is going to have to be tested in the face of, whether it be friendships, whether it be in fellowships, doesn't matter what it is, even in his own household, with his own family, he will be put to the test. Will he lay down his life? Will he be willing to sacrifice no matter what? And so these are the tests that Joseph has had to undergo, but he's had to prove faithful. So in verse 46, we see now that Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before the Pharaoh, sovereign of Mitzrayim, and Yosef went out from the presence of the Pharaoh, went throughout all the land of Mitzrayim. And in the 7 years of plenty, the ground brought forth generously. And so Joseph is 30 years old when he goes out, just like Yahushua was 30 years of age when he also went out and started his ministry. And so understand, the 7 years of plenty, the ground brought forth generously. In our season of blessing, we will bring forth much fruit for Yahuwah. The harvest is ripe, but the workers are few. And so therefore, we need to raise up in this hour and bringing the harvest while we still can in these fat years before the lean years come. The lean years are coming. The famine is upon us. And that is why we are to do the work of the Father as much as we can. While the days of plenty are out there, we are to be in this time, the years of the blessing, we are to be faithful with the Father's resources in this hour to be able to prepare the ground for the Father in the years of plenty. So in the years of plenty, what do we find ourselves doing with the finances that the Father gives us, or the things that the Father's giving us? Are we building His kingdom, or are we building our own kingdom? Whose kingdom are we building? And so in verse 51, so even if there is hardships, in your time of favor, you will produce a harvest where those around you might be going through difficulties. And so in Genesis 41 verses 51, Joseph called the name. He has 2 sons, and the firstborn is Manasseh. From Eluah has made me forget all the toil and all my father's house. So the first child, it's a blessing to Joseph. And Joseph forgets the hardships of his youth, of the years of when he was sold into slavery by his own brothers, and the hardship that he went through in the jail and in Potiphar's house as a slave, and what he had to go through in being able to be blamed for a crime that he never committed. And the name of the second was called Ephraim, for Eluah has caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. So even though he was afflicted, even though in this land he's been afflicted, put in jail, been a slave, but he has been fruitful, and now he has multiplied. He's come from the prison into the palace. He's got a beautiful wife, Potiphar's daughter, and he is now a prince, and he is now a mighty man of valor, the one who's now going to be able to bring grain. So look and see, in the 7 years of scarcity of food began to come, and Joseph said, from verses 54, and all the land of Mitzrayim there was bread. But when all the land of Mitzrayim hungered, and the people cried to Pharaoh for bread, Pharaoh said to all the Mitzrites, go to Joseph, to wherever he says to you, and do whatever he says to you. So at the end of the day, in the time of the famine, those that are truly the fathers, those sealed off, set apart remnant ones, are going to raise up, and they will have the bread to give, the manna to give, the word to give to those that will come around them. And all the earth came to Joseph in Mitzrayim to buy grain, because scarcity of food was severe in all the land. There will come a scarcity, there will come a famine, not only of the food, but there will come a famine of the word. And so Father has those whom He's going to raise up in these last days. There is already a famine of the truth of the word that is going forth, because there's a lot of word going out there, but it's not the food that one needs to be able to feed one's life. It is watered down, mixed with Babylon's things and false things, many, many false things, and watered down things that is not going to feed the very soul, the very mind, will, emotions of man, that's not even going to feed the spirit to be able to give the person water to drink in this thirsty, parched land. But Joseph has been raised up in this hour to be able to bring the manna that's going to feed the people in the time of famine. And so this remnant bride has been raised up. She will have oil in her lamps to be able to give that oil that only the Father has been able to give her to those that will be around her. The manna that will come from the Father's heart, from the Father's mouth, that will bring an encouragement, that will bring a word to be able to raise up a people in a time of great darkness and famine. And so we have a look now in chapter 42. And in chapter 42 we see that there is then no food in Canaan either. There is no food in the land of Israel, in the land of Canaan, in the promised land. And now Jacob must come to Egypt to buy food. Why was Joseph anointed? Why have we been anointed, set apart, filled with the Ruach, so that we can go forth, so that we can be used to bring in the harvest? There will be a great famine of the true word of Yahuwah, and we will have the true manna for people to eat. Joseph was set apart. He went through much hardships, but it was all for Yahuwah's kingdom. So now we have to raise up, be filled with the Ruach of Yahuwah, and to give the manna, and to bring in the harvest for the Father. And so in verses 6 it says, and Joseph was governor over all the land. He was the one who sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed down before him with their faces to the earth. And Joseph saw his brothers, and he recognized them, but he acted as a stranger to them, and spoke to them harshly, and said to them, where do you come from? And they said, from the land of Canaan, to buy food. So Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. And Joseph remembered the dreams which he had dreamed about them, and said to them, you are spies. You have come to see the nakedness of the land. And so understand, at the appointed time, those dreams that you have seen, those prophetic words that the Father has spoken, you will see them play out before your very eyes. You will see the prophetic words play out. Those things that the Father has spoken before the foundations of the earth, that was written in your scroll, that has been shown you in visions, in dreams, that has been prophesied over your life, you will see those words play out before your very eyes. And Joseph is now raised up exactly as the two dreams that he saw, when those stars, moon, all of that bowed before him, when the sheaves bowed before him, the dreams that he had, he's seeing it now play out before his very eyes. And so in verse 21, and so he turns around in verses 16, he says, send me one of you, and let him bring your brother while you are kept in prison. So let your words be proven. So Joseph tells them that they're spies. They tell them that they are brothers, but they have a youngest brother that is not with them. And so he says, send one of you and let him bring your brother while you are kept in prison. So let your words be proven, to see whether there is any truth in you, or else by the life of Pharaoh you are spies. And he put them all in prison for 3 days. Now Joseph said to them the third day, do this and live, for I fear Allah. So understand, now Joseph is going to give them a little bit of their own medicine back. Now they're going to be able to pay for what they've done to him. Now understand, our sin will always catch up with us. If we have sinned, and if we have been guilty of sin, and we have not repented of our sin, then the sin will catch up with us. And so your sin will catch up with you. And here we see that by verse 21, they said to each other, truly we are guilty concerning our brother, for we saw the distress of his life when he pleaded with us, yet we did not listen. This is why the distress has come upon us. So understand, you cannot do someone wrong without it coming back to you if you have not repented of your sin. So what you sow is what you reap at the end of the day. So if you've sowed it, you're going to reap it. And they sowed it to him, and now they're reaping of it. And now they are understanding what they did to their brother. And if they had not repented, now repentance is going to come upon their lips. And so many times, only when we go through our hardships in our life, then the Father opens up our eyes to make us understand what we have done to others. And so your sin will catch up with you eventually. And so by verse 22, Reuben answered them, saying, did I not speak to you, saying, do not sin against the boy? And you would not listen, and see his blood is now required from us. Because Reuben was the one that was trying to go and save Joseph, if you remember. But the brothers were the ones, and who was it that sold him out? At the end of the day, Judah was the one who sold out his brother Joseph. And this is what we see going on in the land today. Judah is the one wanting to sell out the house of Israel that does not want them to be returning back to the land. Because at this point in time, Ephraim is not able to return because Judah, it will sell out, even if there are people in this land that come into this land and they make aliyah in this land, and if they're bold enough to go out there and to speak their faith, and it comes to the ears of the Orthodox Jews, they will have you thrown out of the land, because that is what gets done. And so still today, Judah is the one that will throw out Ephraim from the land. So there might be many that will return to the land, but if they are bold to be able to stand for their faith and for the truth of the word, and want to practice and live out their faith, and it comes to the ears of the authorities that is run by the nation. It's like I was speaking to a man 2 days ago, and he was telling me how this land is really controlled by the rabbinut, by the rabbis, and they have their way. And so, and like he was explaining many things to me, and I was thinking, every time I come here, I learn a little bit more of the intricate details of the things that go on in this land. And truly it is controlled by a rabbinut. So truly it will be controlled by a pharisaical system. And so what did the Pharisees do to our Messiah? They sold him out. They had him put to death. And so what is it that will come to those that want to believe in the Messiah Yahushua? I saw it witnessed with my own eyes on the southern steps on the day of when we had Shavuot, how the Orthodox Jews stood and chanted and wanted nothing to do with the one who is their Messiah, even if right now he's been called by a different name. He is still the one whom we, as the ones who keep Torah, would call him Yahushua. Still, they will not receive him. Still, they do not want to see him. Still, they do not want to accept him as their Messiah. And so it continues, where Judah will not want to allow brother Ephraim in. But yet, brother Ephraim is the one that the father's going to raise up, the prodigal son that left the father's house, that at the appointed time, he will be the one to return, and the father will give him the robe, will give him the shoes to go forth and preach the word of the Father, to bring in the lost tribes, to bring them in, gives them the rod of authority, gives him the robe that he will carry, even though it is Judah from where Messiah comes. And so yet, Father will raise up Joseph that comes from the house that eventually is going to be Ephraim, because his 2 sons, from his son Ephraim, is going to come the lost tribes. And so this is what we must understand, the 2 houses that stand, and how the one house will persecute the other. but there will come a time of humility, and this is what we're going to see in chapter 42 and chapter 43, especially by 43. And so, we see that their sin has caught up to them. And verse 28, he said to his brothers, my silver has been returned, and there it is in my sack. And their hearts sank, and they were afraid, saying to each other, what is this that Eloah has done to us? So the fear of Yahweh hits them, because now Joseph plays games with them, and Joseph is putting their silver back in their bags, and now they're going with all this grain, but at the same time the silver is returned. And now by the time we get to verse 37, we see once again, so the fear of Yahweh is coming upon them for what they have done to their brother, and now they fear, because the fear, you see, until the fear of Yahweh comes upon our hearts, we still fear man above fearing Yahweh. When we fear Yahweh, then we understand that He's the one that we stand for. He's the one that we represent, and not man. And we represent the Father, and therefore we fear Him, and we want to be obedient to Him and Him alone. And so in verse 37, Reuben speaks to his father. So Yaakov, their father, said to them, you have bereaved me. Joseph is no more, and Shimon is no more, and you would take Benjamin. All this is against me. So Reuben spoke to his father, saying, take the lives of my two sons, if I do not bring him back to you. Put him in my hands, and I myself bring him back to you. So now they are telling him the only way that we can go back is by taking Benjamin with, and Reuben once again is the oldest, and he's willing to stand in the gap for his brother. So you see, Reuben is willing to lay down his life for his brother Benjamin. But now by the time we get to 43, we are going to see the scarcity of food is going to increase in the land. And Judah spoke to his father, and saying, the man vehemently warned us, saying, you do not see my face unless your brother is with you. And so Judah again tells Yaakov to say, we need to go get food. We don't have enough food, but we cannot come before him unless we bring Benjamin with us. And Israel said, why did you do evil to me to inform the man that you still have another brother? And so they spoke the truth. And so we see they're not liars. They're speaking the truth. On their lips, they've spoken that they have yet another brother. They've told him that the other brother is dead, and they have yet another brother. And Judah said to Israel, his father, interesting, here it's not the word Jacob that's being used, but Israel. Send the boy with me. And this is now when we see Judah raising up. Send the boy with me. Go and live and not die, both we and you, and also our little ones. And so he's saying to his father, we need to live, we cannot die. So do not, you see, sometimes we want to hold on to what we got. And this was this was Yaakov, Israel, holding on to his youngest son, and will be willing to die by holding on to that which he's got. But many times we need to lay down in order to be able to live. We need to lay down our lives in order to live. That's why he says, no greater love is there than for you to lay down your life for another. And if you want to save your life, you will lose it. But if you lose your life for my name's sake, you will save it. And then he says, I myself shall stand guarantee for him. From my hand you are to require him. If I do not bring him back to you and set him before you, then let me bear the blame forever. We see now our Yehuda raises up in his authority and speaks life to his father. And he raises up and reminds his father of the promises that the father has spoken, that they are to preserve life. They are to be the seed that must preserve life. And here we see how Judah is going to stand in the gap for his brother. And so here we see how Judah stands in the gap for Benjamin, and how eventually these two tribes will stand together. How these two tribes will eventually become one tribe, where Judah stands in the gap as a guarantor for his brother Benjamin. And so they go forth, And in verses 16, Joseph saw Benjamin with them and said to the one over his house, bring the men home and make a great slaughter and prepare, for these men are to eat with me at noon. So just like the prodigal son that is going to come, when the father goes and prepares a meal, slaughters the fatted calf, Joseph is going to prepare a meal for his brothers as they are coming. And so Joseph prepares a meal in the presence of our enemies. Father prepares a table for us in the presence of our enemies. And so if we have a look at Psalm 23, isn't it beautiful in Psalm 23, where we see here from verses 5, you spread before me a table in the face of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil, my cup runs over. And this is what Joseph is. Joseph is now going to prepare a meal for his brothers that were his enemies, but yet now they are his long-lost brothers, and he sees his brother Benjamin, and he prepares a meal, and so he stands in, like Yahushua, eventually that will spread a banquet. In Revelation chapter 19, there will be a banquet laid out for us. Let's read Revelation chapter 19, because he was one that was clothed in linen. And so it says in Revelation chapter 22, verse 11, and he Revelation chapter 21. Where he's going to be able to prepare for us a table, and he is going to be able to prepare for us the fact that we are going to be able to dine with him. And the marriage supper of the Lamb in Revelation chapter 19. Let us be glad and rejoice and give him praise. Revelation 19 verses 7. Let us be glad and rejoice and give him praise. For the marriage of the Lamb has come, and his wife prepared herself. And to her it was given to be dressed in fine linen, clean and bright. For the fine linen is the righteousnesses of the set apart ones. So do you understand how important our works is to the Father, our righteousness before him, the fact that we are willing to be set apart and do what is right in his sight, and be able to keep his Torah, keep his ways, and do what is right in his sight. For the fine linen is the righteousness of the set apart ones. And he said to me, write, blessed are those who have been called to the marriage supper of the Lamb. And he said to me, these are the true words of Eloah. And who are those that are going to be able to be called to the marriage supper of the Lamb? Because in Revelation chapter 14, they were sealed. And this is what it says. And in verses 14, verses 5, and in their mouth, so they are the ones that follow the Lamb. So verse 4 says, they are those who were not defiled with woman, for they are maidens. They are those following the Lamb wherever he leads them. They were redeemed from among men, being first fruits to Eloah and to the Lamb. And in their mouth was found no falsehood. So in our mouth is to be found no falsehood. So we cannot continue to speak the false things on our lips if we want to be the set apart ones of the Father. For they are blameless before the throne of Eloah. And so therefore they are the ones that follow the Lamb wherever he goes, and upon their lips is found no falsehood. And they are first fruits unto the Father, the remnant bride that is raising up before the Father. And so he is setting a banquet before them, and so here they sit down in verses 23 of 43, Genesis 43 verses 23. But he said, peace be with you, do not be afraid. Your Eloah and the Eloah of your fathers has given you treasure in your sacks. Your silver had come to me, and he brought Shimon out to them. And the man brought the men into Joseph's house and gave them water, and they washed their feet, and he gave their donkeys fodder. And so here we see they are going to wash their feet, and they're going to be prepared to have a meal. Now, is this not what our Messiah has done with us? They are going to sit at a meal, and they are going to have their feet washed. And is this not what Messiah did with his disciples. So in John chapter 13, so if we go to John chapter 13, but before we go to John chapter 13, let's just go to Exodus chapter 30. So before we go to John, let's just go to Exodus chapter 30 so that we see that this is the way a father washes even the Levites before they were to enter in Exodus chapter 30. So let's just go to Exodus chapter 30, Shemot chapter 30, verses 17. And in verses 17 it says, And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, And you shall make a basin of bronze with its stand, also of bronze, for washing. And you shall put it between the tent of appointment and the slaughter place, and shall put water in it. And Aaron and his sons shall wash from it their hands and their feet when they go into the tent of appointment, or when they come near the slaughter place to attend to burn an offering made by fire to Yahuwah. They wash with the water lest they die. Now I find it so interesting that even on the day of Shavuot, the Father gave us the rain. That was the washing of the hands, the washing of the feet. We were being washed on those 7 steps by the water before the fire was to come forth. And so there was a water and a fire coming forth for the raising up of this priesthood that needed to be raised up. There was a washing, a cleansing, a washing of the water of the heavens, the rain that came down, that came to wash, and the fire that was being released. So there was a baptism of water and of fire that was coming forth on the day of Shavuot. And so here we see how these priests also were having to be cleansed. And so in John chapter 13, interesting, before Yahushua is going to have have his last meal with his disciples, what does he do? He takes off his garments and he washes their feet. So in John chapter 13, verses 3 to 4, and it says, Yahushua, knowing that the Father had given all into his hands, and that he had come from Elua, was going to Elua, rose from supper and laid aside his garments, and having taken a towel, he girded himself. After that he put water into a basin and began to wash the feet of the taught ones, and to wipe them with the towel with which he was girded. So at the end of the day, the Father is going to wash us with his word. He washes us with the water of the word, and at the same time, he is going to sit them down to have a meal. So they're sitting down having a meal, and he's washing them as well, and he's serving them. And so verse 12 says, So when he had washed their feet and taken his garments and sat down again, he said to them, Do you know what I have done to you? You call me teacher and master, and you say, Well, for I am. Then if I, master and teacher, have washed your feet, you also are to wash one another's feet. So we are to be there to wash one another's feet, to be able to cleanse one another, to wash one another with the word, to be able to speak to one another the word of Yahuwah, and to wash one another, to cleanse one another, to help, because you see, iron sharpens iron, and many times the word is what's going to come and wash the person clean, but many times the person doesn't want to receive the word. This is the problem. Then, for I gave you an example that you should do as I have done. Truly, truly, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is an emissary greater than he who sent him. If you know these teachings, blessed are you if you do them. I do not speak concerning all of you. I know whom I have chosen, but that the scripture might be fulfilled. He who eats bread with me has lifted up his heel against me. So there are many that are going to turn against the Father in these last days. There are many that are going to deny Yeshua in these last days. They will have dined with him. They will have eaten with him. He will have washed them. But yet, they're going to turn on him in these last days, because they will fear man above fearing him. And they will not die for their faith, because they have not shown that they truly stand for him when the time comes. Who do we fear? And it's easy to say, I will die for him. But you first have to learn to prove to live for him, to speak for him, to stand for him. even in the face of persecution, like Joseph had to stand with Potiphar's wife. And so he says, no servant is greater than his master. So whatever persecution he's been through, we are going to be having to go through. And this is what we need to understand. And so we look at verse 20. Truly, truly, I say to you, he who receives whomever I send receives me, and he who receives me receives him who sent me. When Yeshua had said this, he was troubled in spirit and witnessed and said, truly, truly, I say to you, one of you shall deliver me up. So understand, there are many that who went out with us, but will not stand with us in the end, because they will deny Yeshua, like many are denying Yeshua at the moment. Many are denying him. They say they stand for him, but they will deny him and turn to religious systems and religious demons and religious customs and traditions. And we must understand, religion in the end is going to kill us. This is the irony of what happened when I was standing on those southern steps at Shavuot. You had all these Christians standing there praying for the Jews. Their eyes need to be open for them to see their Messiah. But yet, at the same time, I am standing there praying that their eyes, the eyes of the Christians, will be open for them to understand the Torah which they do not want to stand by, the Torah which they deny, the Torah which they say is nailed to the cross. And so, do you understand the irony? It's religion. One, an Orthodox Jew, persecuting the other, and the other one persecuting that one because believing that they are the ones that are just so blinded. But the blindness of religion is there to keep us from the truth of our Messiah, Yahushua. And he leads us without any religion. And therefore we are those taught ones that are led by him and him alone. And we obey him even unto death. So from verses 34 it says, a renewed command I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you, and that you also love one another. And love speaks truth. Just like when Yeshua stood in the face of Peter and said, get behind me, Hasatan, because he knew Peter was speaking by the mouth of Satan and not by the mouth of the Father. Because he was looking out for his own interest. Because he thought that this is the Messiah that's coming to deliver him from the hands of the Romans and telling him you cannot go there. By this shall all know that you are my taught ones, if you love one another. Kepha said to Master, why am I unable to follow you now? I shall lay down my life for you. You see, so Peter was very bold to say, I will lay down my life for you. But when he was put to the test 3 times, he showed that he didn't lay down his life for him. Yeshua answered him, shall you lay down your life for me? Truly, truly, I say to you, the cock shall not crow at all until you have denied me 3 times. And so many times in our boldness, we stand and we say, oh, I will not deny him. But when we put to the test, what do we do? When we put to the test before man, what do we do? And this is when the true test comes. And we've covered all of this when we were doing the Revelation teachings. We covered this. And so we must understand that there's no greater love than for you to lay down your life for another. And this is what we're going to see as we're going to end off with Genesis chapter 44, and we're going to read from verses 14 to 18, and we see exactly what Judah is going to do for his brother. And this is what we know Messiah Yahushua is going to do for us. Yahushua eventually is going to lay down his life for us. And this is what Yahushua comes from the tribe of Judah, that is going to lay down his life for us. And so from verses 14 it says, and Yehuda and his brother came to Joseph's house, and he was still there. And they fell before him on the ground. And Joseph said to them, "What deed is this you have done?" Because by this time what has happened is now they have had a wonderful meal. Joseph has sat with them. Joseph blessed his brother more than them with the bigger meal. And now when they left, he took his cup and he put it in Benjamin's bag. And when they had left, as they were riding away, all of a sudden he comes and he says, "How could you have done this? After I served you, after I was good to you, you steal my goblet." And then it's found in Benjamin's bag, planted there by Joseph himself, who told his servants to plant it in Benjamin's bag. And now they're all going to be taken back. And now Judah is going to stand up. And now understand, this is when the real test is going to come to Judah. This is the test that is going to come to these brothers of Joseph. Joseph is going to have one last test to see, is their heart truly repented for what they did to him, or will they treat his brother differently to what they treated him, even though his brother is a son of another mother? How will they treat Benjamin? And this is the test that is put before them. And Judah and his brothers came to Joseph's house, and he was still there, and they fell before him on the ground. And Joseph said to them, "What deed is this you have done? Did you not know that a man like me indeed divines?" And Yehudah said, "What did we say to my master? What do we speak? What do we say to our master? What do we speak? Or how do we clear ourselves? Eluah has found out the crookedness of your servants. See, we are my master's slaves, both we and he also with whom the cup was found." So now he doesn't allow him to take the blame alone. He says, we all to blame. No greater love is there than to lay down your life for a brother. We all take the blame. Now he doesn't sell out his brother. Judah is not going to sell out his brother. And so yeah, we see Judah take the lead. Judah was the one who sold him out. Judah was the one who sold out Joseph. He was the one who was going to be given the scepter to lead. He was the one given the scepter in Genesis 49, 8-9. We see that he's the one who's going to be given the scepter, because out of the tribe of Yehudah is going to come our Messiah, Yahushua, who eventually becomes the one who is our master, our ruler, where there will neither be neither Jew nor Gentile, but we will all be one in Messiah. And so he will gather the 12 tribes, no tribe being greater than the other, but he will gather the two sticks to become one house. We will look at that in the next Torah portion in Ezekiel 37, where the two sticks become one house. But out of the house of Judah is going to raise up Messiah Yahushua, who is the one who's going to have the scepter of authority that is going to stand, and to all tribes will then come under him. And he will take the lead. And he raises up and speaks up on behalf of them all, but not in arrogance and pride, but in humility. And we now see he's not selling out Benjamin as he did Joseph. He is willing that they all be captured and put in jail for the sake of Benjamin. He will not make excuses. He is confessing the sin. He's saying, we are all guilty. We are all guilty. He is not even trying to make an excuse. You see, is that the kind of humility that we have before the Father? We don't make excuses. We bow before him and we stand in the gap and we say, we have all sinned. We are all sinners. And so, this is great humility on behalf of Yehudah. He's willing to lay down his life and all their lives for what has happened, and he's not selling out his brother. And this shows the great love that he has for his brother and for his father, because he's going to feel sorry for his father. And he said he will stand in the gap for his brother. He said, I will be the guarantor. And so Yeshua is the one who stood in the gap for all mankind. He's the one who stands in the gap. And so that's why when we have a look at our Haftorah, as we're going to close off with our Haftorah, a scripture that really I had to pray about and say, Father, what is the purpose of you wanting to be able to give us this Haftorah from 1 Kings 3? But instead of me reading from 1 Kings 3, verse 15, I'm actually going to read from 1 Kings chapter 3 from verses 9. And it says, let's read from verse 11. So Elua said to him, because you have asked this. So he says, and the words were good. So verse 9, shall you then give your servant an understanding heart to rule your people? So he's asking for an understanding heart to rule his people, to discern between good and evil, for who is able to rule this great people of yours? So he asked the Father for wisdom to rule his people. He asked for a discerning heart to rule his people. He didn't ask for wealth. He didn't ask for riches. He didn't ask for anything. When Father asked Shlomo, what does he want? He asked for a discerning heart, an understanding heart to rule the people, to rule between good and evil. And so Elua says to him in verse 11, because you have asked this and have not asked for long life for yourself, nor have asked riches for yourself, nor have asked the life of your enemies, but have asked for yourself the discernment to understand right ruling. So you see, what do we ask before the Father? What is our praise? You see, he could have asked anything he wanted. But what did he ask for? And see, I shall give you a wise and understanding heart, so that there was none like you before. There was none like you before you, and none like you arise after you. And I shall also give you what you have not asked, both riches and esteem. And there shall not be anyone like you among the sovereigns all your days. And then verse 14 is the key to Solomon's life. And this is the key for us as well. All of this he was going to give to him, but there was a condition. And if you walk, so if, just like Exodus chapter 19, if you will obey my voice and keep my charge, then you will be a treasured possession above all the peoples of the earth. Exodus chapter 19 verses 5. And if you walk in my ways to guard my laws and my commands, as your father David walked, then I shall prolong your days. And Shlomo awake, and see, it was a dream. And he came into Jerusalem and stood before the ark of the covenant of Yahuwah, and offered up ascending offerings and made peace offerings, and he made a feast for all the servants. And then they came to woman, and this is the whole message of this Haftorah, that these two women, and it's interesting, both women were whores, and they came to the sovereign and stood before him. And so what happened was, there were two women, they were both known to be whores. The one had a child, and in the night they both had children. And on the third day, it says, on the third day after having given birth, that this woman also gave birth, and we were both together. There was no one else with us in the house, only two of us in the house. And what happens is, one of them falls asleep, and kills her child while she sleeps, smothers her child to death, takes the dead child, goes and puts it next to the other one, and takes the living child and brings it to her. And so when the one wakes up and sees the dead child, looks at the child properly and realizes this is not her child, and now wants the other one to give her back her living child, and now there's a dispute, and now they both come before King Solomon. And so King Solomon looks at them and says, okay, I've listened to the argument, but whose child is it? So he says, all right, let's take a sword, and we divide the child in half, and we will give each one half of the child to each one. And then the real mother, who is the mother of the living child, does not want her child to be killed, because she has a love for her child, and says, no, please don't do that, give her the child. And at that, Solomon then knows that this is the real mother, because she's willing to lay down her life, lay down her child, lay down her having to have the child and give it to the other woman so that her child can live, and then gives the child to her. And so when I prayed about this, I said, Father, what is this all about? And so we see that there's two whores, both have fornicated, both have given birth without really having husbands. And so we look at the two houses, the house of Israel and the house of Jacob, and both of them are really fornicators because they both fornicated. And yet, on the third day after giving birth, the one son dies, and one whose son it is was overcome with compassion and was willing to lay her son down and gave it to the other, the lying, evil one, because one was lying and evil. And this is the picture of the true bride, because this is how the Father showed me there are two brides. There are two brides. Both have fornicated, both have gone astray. Both will stand before the King. One is going to be one that is going to lie. She doesn't stand for the truth. She stands for what's lying. She doesn't have a love for the truth. She doesn't have a love for that which is the truth. She is a liar. She's received a son. She's received the Messiah. But through her own doing, she has suffocated the child in her life. Why? Because of her own religious ways. Her own deception of her own religious ways. And this is the picture of the true bride and the false bride. The true bride will lay her life down for the Son of the living Yah. Even if she was a whore, she will lay her life down for him. But the evil bride has a wicked heart. She wants the benefits by lying and deceiving, but is not willing to lay down her life to be humble and lowly. We will face the tests to see if we are true to the Messiah, the Son of the living Yah. So the tests are there to be able to test us to see if we will lie and scheme and plan and still want all the benefits of the kingdom, even though we achieve it. How? By going about being deceptive. This woman wanted a child. Her own child had died, but she still wanted the blessing of having a child, but through a deceptive way. And she had no love for a child, because if she had a love for a child, she would not have wanted to see it killed. She was willing to say, well, neither one of us are going to have anything. But the real bride has a love for the Father and for his kingdom, and is willing to lay down her life. No greater love is there than to lay down your life for another, just like Judah is willing to lay down all their lives for Benjamin. And that's what Messiah Yahushua said. They will know that you are my disciples when you have love one for another, when you're willing to lay down your life for a brother for the sake of truth, even if it means you're going to be persecuted for doing it, even if it means you're going to die for having done it. But you will stand for the truth and speak the truth. May Abba Yahuwah bless you all. May you all have a wonderful Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom to you all. Shalom.